I'm Ben Harmon. I'm here with ASW here at Tech Talk Tuesdays. This episode we're going to be talking about some things to keep in mind, choosing a digital console or an analog console. What do you want to think about as you're making a decision for your next soundboard? Last episode we talked about the differences between digital and analog consoles. Now we want to talk about some of the factors you may want to consider as you're looking at getting your next board. So hopefully you already know some of the difference between analog and digital consoles, but what are some other things you want to keep in mind as you're making a decision for a new board? One of the main things you got to think about is who's going to be operating it. If you don't do anything else, always keep in mind who will be operating your board. Do you have a great team of professionals in the industry who are, able to operate some of the really complicated high-end boards? Or do you have a team of volunteers who, are going to need something a little bit simpler to operate? I've seen a few times, where people have put in boards that are beyond their operators. And while that can be, some great incentive for them to learn and to step up, you can also end up with some people who are frustrated because they can't figure out how to run the new system. And vice versa too, if you get a really simple board for some people who are a little bit more advanced, you're holding them back from being able to give you the best mix you can get, as well as some other features that are going to make their jobs a lot easier and a lot more pleasant for them to do. So you've got to keep that in mind. Always remember, who is this, who's going to be operating this board, and don't forget that even when you bring in all the other factors in. So the other thing you got to keep in mind is your I/O or your inputs and outputs, and your processing for that. So hopefully, you've got maybe an idea of what your normal worship service looks like, or what your normal event, whatever it may be, would look like, and how many singers you're going to have, how many people you're going to have, with headsets for speaking. You're going to have drums, bass, guitar, all the different instruments. And then you can start counting up, okay, how many channels am I going to need? So maybe you have a drum kit, but maybe you only use, a kick and a snare mic, or maybe an overhead. Or maybe you're doing a full production where you've got, 2 kick mics, 2 snare mics, 2 overheads, a mic for all the toms and all this. You start to add up more channels. So just go through and think, okay, what are we doing now? How many channels are we going to use? If you've got a board already, then you can probably count how many channels are we using. And then you're going to want to think too, how much we're going to want to do in the future that might require some more inputs. Once you've got that number, that's a really great help to be looking at boards. You need, okay, I need at least 35 inputs. So you can look at boards that have at least 35 inputs, and it will help you make a decision, based on being able to get rid of some of the smaller boards. The other question you're going to want to ask is, how many outputs do I need? So if you're just mixing for your house speakers, you're only going to need your one house output. It might be stereo, might be mono, but it's still just the one bus. If you're mixing monitors, you're going to need to know, okay, how many monitors am I mixing? Same if you're mixing in-ears from your console, how many in-ear channels are we using? And those are all stereo buses, so you got to keep in mind that that's 2 physical outputs. Are we recording? Do we need to send a recording feed somewhere? Are we streaming? Do we need to make a streaming feed to go somewhere else? All these little things, that you got to think about. What are we doing both now, and then also what are we going to want to do in the future? So those are some of the things to keep in mind as you think, okay, right here we've got the Q16, right? So we've got 16 inputs and we've got 10 outputs. 3 of those outputs are stereo, so really you only have 7 outputs. So, that would work great. Say you've got a small band, you only need 14 inputs. You've got 1 stereo for your house, maybe you've got the other 2 stereo for in-ears, and you've got 3 wedges, so you've got 3 mono channels for that. So you've got 1 output left, and you're all set and fine. But then, maybe if you decide, okay, all the band wants to go to in-ears now. Oh, well, now you've got a problem because you only have, 3 stereo outputs, and you won't be able to give all the musicians their own separate in-ear feed. So then you'd think, oh, well, we got to come to something like the X32 or a bigger board. Allen and Heath has some bigger boards as well as some of the other major brands. And you'd want to think, okay, we want to get that one because it'll provide enough inputs and outputs for what we need. The other big thing, obviously, you got to consider when you're purchasing a board is your budget. Boards range from being, fairly inexpensive to being, a lot of money, especially if you're a smaller church or, you're a musician who's just looking for something for his gigs. And so you got to keep in mind, okay, how much can I spend? And you got to try and find something that gives you all of your necessary inputs and outputs, as well as the user experience that you want within your budget. So maybe another thing to consider too is what onboard processing you're going to want. A lot of digital boards now have the ability to have built-in effects. And so you can have effects buses where you can apply reverb, delay. You can even do maybe a de-esser. Maybe you've got someone on a headset mic that's just real bad with their S's, so you need to do something about that. You can get some fancy compressors. You can do all kinds of things with effects now. So maybe you say, oh man, we really want to get some nice reverb for our mixes. So you gotta maybe look at a board that has effects built in and has some good reverbs in it. Some of the other things is the features too of the processing itself. So maybe you say, oh, we really want a compressor on every channel. So you're going to want to be looking at a digital board with a compressor built into it. Same thing, you've got gates, high-pass filters, parametric EQ. Another thing is inserts. Maybe you still have some outboard gear you want to use, and you've got some insert points so you can send that out and back in. So just take a look, when you're going through looking for boards, look at the manuals, and see, is this going to provide what I really want to do with this board? And so that'll be another big, factor is, can it do what I need it to do on the processing side of things? And of course, here at ASW, we're always happy to help you in making your decision. We've got a great sales team and some great engineers with plenty of experience with all different kinds of brands, not just these here, but plenty more. And we'd be more than happy to help you as you're making your decision for what you're looking for in your next board.